got a fascinating game to show you here. Liren against Anish Giri. I tell you what, things are really building to a grand finale in the Tata Steel Masters. It's the morning after the night before, and before I let you know what happened in round 9 overall, let's dive into this game. It was very, very interesting. Ding starts gently with a Reti, and Anish playing very solidly, offering, well, perhaps it could go into a Catalan. And now c4, castles. Here, of course, white can play d4 and we have a Catalan. But Ding goes for b3, so this is, well, it's a kind of English Catalan, you could say. But of course, a very well-known variation. White sets up solidly with bishop b2 and usually e3 and queen e2. And here, Giri plays in the most ambitious way, d4. So this transposes into a kind of reversed Benoni. So black claims space. And yeah, definitely an ambitious way of playing. e3 and c5. I mean, here you could say that the standard continuation for white is to exchange on d4 and play rook e1. So you can see it's a kind of Benoni setup here. But Ding plays knight e5, which is less common, but in fact these players had done battle in exactly this variation in 2019. So both players obviously came to the board pretty well armed. Queen c7. I mean, before I carry on with the game, I mean, knight e5 is an ambitious move because it opens up the bishop's diagonal. And white is looking to support that knight with pawn to f4. So, you know, shutting this pawn down, basically. Queen c7 attacks the knight. And now f4. Now, their previous game had gone knight fd7. And, well, if it kind of fizzled out to a draw at some point, but it was also very complex. But quickly, very quickly in this game, Giri played knight bd7 instead of knight fd7. So this is his improvement. And it seemed that Ding was ready for this improvement as well. And of course, if you look at the computer, then it will tell you that it favours knight bd7. Knight d3. And here Giri had previously played bishop d6. He played that in 2021. But yeah, very quickly Giri played e5. And this is the computer approved move. So Giri had done his homework, no doubt about that. So this is very interesting. Black is trying to establish some kind of center, but it's very fluid. You know, there's a lot of pressure on this center from these pawns. Knight a3, fairly quickly played by Ding. So this could be very irritating. Therefore a6, which leaves that knight rather stranded on a3. And now Ding invested just over 8 minutes on bishop b2. So a sign that he's not entirely familiar with the position, whereas Giri was still moving fairly quickly here. Just about a minute or so over bishop d6. And now Ding played g4 very quickly. And that, of course, really raises the stakes in the position. g4, of course, you know, advancing the pawn in front of the king is risky. Also gives black potential on this diagonal. However, if this knight can be pushed back, then, well, it could be the prelude to quite an attack. And yeah, it looks difficult for black once that knight falls back. So here was the first moment in the game where Giri had a long think. I say long, about 6 minutes. He took on f4. And here, Ding invested 26.5 minutes over his next move. Now let's have a look at his options. Well, if this is played, then black is very comfortable. You can see that this bishop is locked out of the game by this pawn. The knight is also very poorly placed. It takes ages to get back into the game. And something like rook e8, just to give that knight potentially a square here. And I think black is very comfortable in that position. As I said, these pieces are poor. Okay, that's not good. What about knight takes f4? Well, then black would play g5. A bold move, but quite possible. If the knight moves, then bishop takes h2. Okay, back we come. So, very tricky situation, but Ding played this move, g5, after a long think, very aggressive move. And, well, Giri played fairly quickly again. He spent only 2.5 minutes over his next move. And he put the knight back on e8. It's a mistake. It's the only square the knight can go to, but it's interesting he showed reluctance to give up material here. The computer likes this move, giving up material. G takes f6, knight takes f6, and this is a highly unclear position. You can see that once white takes that piece, then it does free this bishop, and this can be taken. Something could hit the g4 square. It's very tricky. In fact, white's best is to sacrifice the exchange and then take on e3. At least this bishop will play an active role in the game. And who knows what is going on here? It's just highly unclear. But that is the computer's line. Okay, that's what the computer favours for black. But after knight e8, you can see this knight has no square to go to now. It's completely blocked in. You know, it's just like a big piece of heavy furniture, and just gets in the way of black's pieces. So I'm surprised that Giri played that quickly. Knight takes f4 from Ding, and you can see things have kind of straightened out. And here Giri had a big think. Almost 18 minutes over d takes e3, he realised that his position was actually looking a bit dubious. That knight can possibly enter d5, perhaps even a bishop, and then g6 and you know, moves like queen h5. This is very dangerous for black, considering that there's a real traffic jam here, and of course the knight blocking. So Giri took, and pawn takes, but again, what a traffic jam of pieces. It's extremely difficult. If knight e5, well, that's possible, but look, that knight on e8 still can't move anywhere, and white can use that d5 square. This is the problem, that knight on e8. So that's why Giri played bishop e5. I mean, that's well motivated, because then the knight can hop out to d6. Queen c2, played quickly. Knight d6. And rook d1. So there's still a bit of a traffic jam here. And playing the rook here is certainly a very nice idea. Just attacking that vulnerable knight on d6, although can't be taken at the moment, but just a little bit of pressure. Now, rook e8 from Giri, supporting the bishop. I'd like you to have a little think here. So I'm going to pick up my mug of tea. Cheers. You have a little think. Black to play. Excuse me, white to play, even. Very good. White to play. How would you play if you had white here? Cheers, folks. The move that Ding played, instinctively, I really like. He put his knight back on b1. You know, you could say that this is the only piece in white's position which simply isn't playing. And after it comes back to b1, it's going to go via c3 to d5. And it just looks wonderful. So I think knight b1 is a good move. And frankly, yeah, really appeals to me. But rook d5 is indicated by the computer as perhaps even better. And the point is this, that it actually prevents black from freeing himself. So this knight can't move because the bishop on e5 could be taken. And if the bishop takes, then that queen is now in a beautiful position, and in combination with the knight coming to h5, that is deadly. The knight still can't block here because these pieces cover e5. And, well, let's, for the sake of argument, we'll play knight f8. And now you can see how powerful this is. White rules the diagonal, and black is not long for this world. I mean, the knight can defend from e6, but one could easily put some pressure on that. I mean, it's really nice that this pawn covers the d4 square, so black can't block there. You know, there's a lot of talk about isolated pawns and how they're weak. In this case, that pawn performs a valuable service for white. Let's go back. Rook e8 just played. Now, as I said, I think knight b1 is an excellent move, but rook d5 probably even stronger. It's all looking fantastic for white, and here is where Giri played a5. Now that is such an ugly move. Now he will have realized that. He's looking perhaps to play rook a6, but it still feels like a very odd place for the rook. But here, I mean, Ding's response was strange. He played a4, and I think that's completely unnecessary. I don't think this is really black's intention to play a4. I think he should have just carried on with knight c3. And this looks absolutely wonderful. So, for example, rook here, knight d5, the queen goes back to d8, h4. You know, white still has superb control here. I don't think it really makes much difference that the rook is on a6. I mean, this bishop is still poor. These pieces look strange. The rook is lined up against the queen. And knight h5 is still quite potent, actually. Possibilities to sacrifice on f6. So a4 was, I think, a strange reaction. Maybe Ding felt he had just more time, or kind of all the time in the world, but it's not the case. Giri took on b2, and the knight came to e5. So black is starting to straighten things out. That knight has a potential square on g4. Knight c3. And now bishop g4 hits the rook. I mean, black has to put up with a piece landing here. So if, excuse me, knight d5, then queen d8. And actually, black is just about okay here. So the rook is attacked. And Ding played rook d5. You can see that white's problem here is that all those pieces want to go through the d5 square. The rook, I suppose, stands quite well there, looking at all these pieces. However, the two knights, the bishop, also would like to occupy that square. So things are not so clear anymore, and particularly after that knight leapt to f5. Magically, Anish has managed to free his pieces and has built up real activity. This is threatened. There's potential to move the knight to h4 as well. And the knight on e5 magically is looking far more secure than a few moves ago. Rook d2 played by Ding after 27 minutes. So clearly he'd appreciated things have just gone wrong and went into the tank, but he didn't come up with a good move. Queen f2, he must have, it feels like a very natural move, and that's what he must have been analysing. And it involves a queen sacrifice. This is a pretty much forced continuation. Check. Of course, a discovered attack on the queen, and that checks, so that has to be taken. Bishop takes, rook takes, and white has 3 minor pieces for the queen. White's king is a little bit exposed. That would concern me if I were white in this position. The rook could come in straight away and follow up with the other one. I mean, if you look at it with a computer, it says roughly balanced, but frankly, I'm not surprised that Ding avoided this, because it feels as though, you know, if anyone is going to break through here, it'll be black somehow. Nevertheless, that was the way to go. But rook d2 played instead. And knight takes e3. Interestingly, the computer likes knight h4, but listen, I don't think you can blame Giri for swiping that pawn. It feels very natural. Knight d5 played. Knight takes, and the queen now ducked back to b8. So white is a pawn up, but still has beautiful piece on d5, and, well, in fact, all white's pieces are active. But it really isn't so clear now. Bishop came back to e6. And here, if white simply activates the queen, perhaps coming to the king side, then the game is still in balance. But Ding played knight f4 quite quickly, and that's simply a blunder. He'd overlooked bishop takes c4. That's a bit of a shocker. If that's taken, knight takes, forking queen and rook. Queen moves to the side, knight takes, queen takes, and queen e5. So we have a material balance of a rook and 3 pawns at the moment against bishop and knight. But more than that, the king is somewhat exposed, and white has really lost this anchor in the middle of the board. You know, there's no longer a pawn on c4. So when rook d8 comes, yeah, it feels like white is really getting pushed around here. So bishop takes c4 played, rook f2, and the rook was attacked. So now it's 2 pawns for black, 2 pawn advantage for Giri. And that knight is a rock in the middle of the board. Knight h5, okay, that rock shouldn't move. Rook e7. Just guarding the 7th, guarding this one. Rook d5, queen c7, so black is emerging. Rook f5 and rook ae8. Well, that is a picture of harmony. I realise the knight can't move at the moment because of the mate on g7. However, it's quite clear that what a transformation over the past few moves. Queen c3. Attacking the pawn, which was defended. And that also gives this bishop the opportunity to just step back to one of those squares to drive the rooks away. 2 pawn advantage, it must be winning for black. But here, Ding speeded things up. He sacked a piece. Knight f6 check, which Giri took. Okay, again, I'm going to give you the move. It's black to play. What would you do with black in this position? Black to play. Well, let's suppose you move the rook. Then rook e6. Queen g3 check. It's a killer. Followed by queen g7 mate if the king moves. And knight g6 loses the queen. That's the problem. In fact, there is only one move to win here. And that's knight f3 check. So Giri had to see that in advance. Okay, let's look at the options. Queen takes, check here, and that's pretty devastating. White has to give up the queen. Bishop takes, queen check here, rook e1. Remember the bishop covers here, so that's winning. Ding played rook takes f3, rook e1 check, and king f2, that's mate. Bishop f1, and nice winning move actually. King h8. Just preparing a check on g8. Very nice. So for example, if rook d2, bishop takes, rook takes, queen f4, black is closing in for the kill. And let's say here, rook g8, there we are, making use of the open g file. And that one goes, and that's mate on g2. I mean, there are here Ding he resigned here, but you know there really is absolutely no defense. So let's try another one. Rook g5. You can take here, and then queen f4 check picks up the rook, and well, it's going to be mate shortly. Quite a turnaround by Anish Giri there, and well, I would say that both players were less than sure-footed when it came to those complications. Giri backed down with knight e8, and that should have given Ding a winning position actually. Although, I mean, knight b1 was very good, but rook d5 was a killer. I mean, actually, Giri realised that in post-game interview. He said during the game, he said, "I realised I'm probably lost here." But afterwards, he said, "I feel very happy because the game wasn't looking good. At one point, I'm borderline lost. I was lucky." Well, he created some luck with this curious move, a5. But frankly, you know, I'm amazed that Ding didn't just play knight c3 and carry on with his wonderful initiative. So it was a curious game, I have to say. But in the end, Giri did very well to finish things off. Now, that win leaves Anish Giri with 6 out of 9, half a point behind Nodibek Abdusatorov, who drew against Vincent Keymer. Keymer came so close to winning. But I tell you what, Abdusatorov clung on with his fingernails and showed incredible determination to hold that game. So Abdusatorov 6.5, Giri 6, Wesley So 5.5. There were some fascinating games actually. I mean, in particular, Richard Rapport won a beautiful game. Maybe you can check that out elsewhere. So 4 rounds to go. Abdusatorov still in the lead by half a point, but I'll tell you what, I think anything could happen in the next 4 rounds. I'll report back on today's game, round 10. So see you soon.